The key turned in the lock, but nothing clicked. I pushed against the heavy oak door of my childhood home, confused. Through the glass panels, I saw a stranger's sofa in the foyer where our antique table used to be. My heart hammered. I pushed harder and the door swung open. "What are you doing in my house?" I screamed into the emptiness. My mother, Genevieve, walked out of the kitchen holding a champagne flute. Her lips curved in a cruel smile. "It's not your house anymore, Ilara. I sold it last week. Your father's legacy paid for Cade's new penthouse." She gestured dismissively at the boxes in the corner. "Now be a dear and grab your bags. The new owners are coming for the final walkthrough in an hour." My legs felt weak. Everything spun. This couldn't be happening. My name is Ilara Vance, and for 10 years I'd been the daughter who worked while my brother Cade spent money like water. I was the one who held my father's hand as he died in the hospital, while Genevieve was busy at the jeweler picking out mourning diamonds. Now she was handing me a trash bag for my sentimental junk, like I was some stranger. I stared at her, speechless, when a black sedan pulled into the driveway. Genevieve's face drained of all color as a man in a sharp suit stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase. "Good morning, Ilara," he said warmly, completely ignoring my mother. "I'm Benton Cross, your father's attorney. The trust is ready to execute your right of first refusal. Shall we go inside and discuss the details?" Genevieve's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. I remembered the day my father signed his will like it was yesterday. I'd been 22, fresh out of university, and he'd called me into his study at Oak Hall. Genevieve had been out shopping with Cade. My father, Alden, looked tired but his eyes were sharp. "Your mother has a certain nature, Ilara," he'd said quietly, sliding documents across his desk. "I've built a cage for the wolves, but the key is yours if you're brave enough to use it." I hadn't understood then. He'd been dying, and I'd thought he was being dramatic. But now, standing in the gutted foyer of my childhood home, I finally understood. He'd known exactly what Genevieve would do. He'd prepared for this moment. And he'd trusted me to be strong enough to fight back when the time came. Cade showed up 30 minutes later, driving a bright red sports car that screamed expensive. He burst through the door like he owned the place. "Where's my cut?" he demanded, looking between Genevieve and me. "The house sold for $2 million, right? I need my share now. I've got debts to clear." Genevieve looked nervous. "Cade, sweetie, we need to wait for." He cut her off. "I already bought the penthouse on credit. I need the money to make the down payment." I stared at my brother, this 30-year-old man who'd never worked a real day in his life. He'd bought property with money he didn't have, assuming our childhood home would cover his recklessness. Benton cleared his throat. "I'm afraid there's been a complication with the sale." Cade's face went red. "What complication?" "Mum said it was done." Benton opened his briefcase and pulled out documents that made my stomach turn. Mrs. Vance used a forged medical report to claim Miss Ilara was missing during her medical volunteer trip overseas. This allowed her to bypass the required signature on the listing agreement. He slid the papers across the table. I picked them up with shaking hands. There was a doctor's note claiming I'd been declared mentally incompetent and unreachable. My signature on the sale documents was obviously forged. The handwriting was nothing like mine. "But I called you from the clinic," I whispered. "I talk to you every week, Mum." Genevieve wouldn't meet my eyes. "You were busy saving strangers in Africa. I was protecting your inheritance by investing it wisely." Benton's voice was ice. "You were committing fraud. And Miss Vance's father anticipated exactly this scenario. Since the sale was technically in legal limbo while the fraud investigation proceeded, I decided to make myself comfortable. I moved back into my old bedroom that same afternoon. Genevieve protested, but Benton made it clear that I had every legal right to be there. I changed the locks on my bedroom door from the inside. Let her try to throw me out again. That night, I heard Genevieve and Cade arguing in the hallway. "You said this was done," Cade yelled. "Now where am I supposed to sleep?" Genevieve's voice was strained. We'll share the guest room until this gets sorted out. I smiled in the darkness. The woman who'd sold my bed while I was overseas saving lives was now forced to share a cramped room with her golden child. Poetic justice tasted sweet. While unpacking my few remaining possessions, I searched online for my father's antique pocket watch, a family heirloom from his grandfather. It wasn't in any of my boxes. I found it 3 days later on a luxury resale website, listed for $15,000. The seller's profile had a location tag. I drove to the address and knocked. A woman in designer clothes answered. "I'm here about the watch you're selling," I said. She looked confused. "Oh, that old thing. My boyfriend gave it to me. Said it was from his dead dad." My blood ran cold. "Your boyfriend is Cade Vance." She nodded proudly. "Yeah, do you know him?" I took photos of her, the watch, and the posting. "I'm his sister. And that watch was stolen from our father's estate. I'll be calling the police." Her face went white as I walked away. Genevieve moved fast to control the narrative. Within a week, rumors spread through our neighborhood like wildfire. At the grocery store, old friends crossed the street to avoid me. At the post office, the clerk who'd known me since childhood wouldn't meet my eyes. I finally cornered Mrs. Patterson, our neighbor for 20 years. "What's going on?" She looked uncomfortable. "Ilara, your mother told us you're having a mental breakdown. She said you're trying to steal her retirement fund, that you've always been unstable." My chest tightened with rage. "And you believed her?" Mrs. Patterson shifted her shopping bags. "She seemed so worried about you. And with your father gone." I walked away before I said something I'd regret. Genevieve had painted me as the villain. The community I'd grown up in had chosen to believe her lies. Benton called me to his office with urgent news. I sat across from his massive desk while he laid out documents that made my head spin. The house wasn't just sold improperly. Your mother attempted to sell it for half its actual value, $1 million instead of $2 million. He pulled up corporate filings on his computer. The buyer is a shell company called Vance Holdings LLC. Your mother is the sole owner. I stared at the screen. She was selling our house to herself. Benton nodded grimly. "It's called money laundering. She lists it for a low price to her own company, loses $1 million on paper, then resells it at market value and pockets the difference while hiding assets from estate taxes." My hands clenched into fists. "Can we prove this?" He smiled coldly. "We already have. And there's more. Much more." The Riverside Charity Gala was the social event of the season. Genevieve attended wearing her black morning gown and those ridiculous diamonds, playing the grieving widow to perfection. She held court at her table, describing her beautiful estate to potential investors. I watched from across the room, wearing my father's favorite blue dress. Then I walked to her table. "Good evening, Mother." Her smile froze. I turned to the investors. "I'm Ilara Vance, Alden's daughter. Has my mother mentioned that the Oak Hall property she's discussing is currently under a legal lien for fraud?" You could hear a pin drop. One investor stood up. "Is this true?" Genevieve's face flushed. "She's not well. I apologize for." Benton appeared beside me with documents. "It's quite true. Mrs. Vance is under investigation. Perhaps you'd like to review the court filings." The investors left immediately. Genevieve's social mask cracked completely. I couldn't sleep that night, so I wandered Oak Hall's empty rooms. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors my father had installed himself. In the library, I remembered something. A hidden safe behind the false panel in the bookcase. My father had shown it to me when I was 12, making me memorize the combination. My birthday backwards. I moved the collected works of Hemingway aside and pressed the panel. Swung open. Inside was a metal lockbox. My hands trembled as I entered the code. The box opened to reveal leather-bound ledgers, filled with Genevieve's handwriting. Page after page documented withdrawals from my personal savings account, the one my father had set up for me. $50,000, taken over 5 years. Money from my nursing scholarships, my part-time jobs, birthday gifts from relatives. All stolen. All hidden. Felt sick. Cade showed up at Oak Hall 2 days later, looking desperate. The sports car was gone, repossessed, I guessed. He found me in the kitchen making coffee. "Ilara, we need to talk." I didn't invite him to sit. "Talk." He fidgeted with his phone. "Look, I know things got out of hand. Mom's probably going to jail, right? For the fraud thing." I sipped my coffee and waited. I could testify against her. Tell them everything I know about her plans. But I need something in return. I raised an eyebrow. "You want me to pay you to tell the truth?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "The penthouse is being foreclosed. I just need enough to cover the car loan, and I'll tell them whatever you need." I set down my cup carefully. "I don't buy family, Cade. I protect it. And you aren't family anymore." His face went pale. Before Cade could respond, I pulled out my phone. "I've been recording this entire conversation." His eyes went wide. "You can't do that." Smiled. "Actually, I can. Single-party consent state. Everything you just said about trading testimony for money is now evidence of witness tampering." Benton had taught me well. "Wait, Ilara, I didn't mean." I held up my hand. "You and Mum deserve each other. You both see family as something to exploit. Dad knew that. That's why his will protected me and left you with nothing." Cade's desperation turned to anger. "He was my father too." I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and felt nothing but pity. Was he, though? The question hung in the air. Cade's face went from red to white. He turned and walked out without another word. I saved the recording and sent it to Benton immediately. I had security cameras installed throughout Oak Hall the day after Cade's visit. The technician was professional and fast. "You'll get alerts on your phone for any unusual activity," he explained. 3 nights later, at 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a motion alert in the kitchen. I pulled up the camera feed and saw Genevieve in her nightgown, holding a lighter near the curtains. My heart stopped. She was trying to set a fire. I called the fire department, then ran downstairs. By the time I reached the kitchen, small flames were climbing the curtains. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the hallway and put it out in seconds. Genevieve stood frozen, caught. "What have you done?" I asked quietly. She said nothing. The fire department arrived minutes later. I showed them the security footage. They called the police. Arson on top of fraud. Genevieve was finally done. I decided it was time the neighborhood knew the truth. I sent invitations for a farewell gathering at Oak Hall, letting everyone think I was finally leaving. Mrs. Patterson came, along with the Hendersons, the Kowalskis, and a dozen other families who'd known me since childhood. They gathered in the living room, making small talk, clearly uncomfortable. "Thank you all for coming," I said, standing by the fireplace. "I wanted to show you something before I left." I turned on the large television and played the security footage. They watched Genevieve attempt arson. Then I played the audio of Cade trying to sell his testimony. Finally, I showed documents proving the fraud and theft. The room was dead silent. Mrs. Patterson had tears in her eyes. "Ilara, we're so sorry. We should have asked you directly." He nodded. "Yes, you should have." But Genevieve was very convincing. The Grand Dame image was shattered completely. By morning, the entire community knew the truth. While organizing the stolen ledgers for Benton, I found something that made my blood run cold. Tucked in the back of the last ledger was a DNA test from a private lab. The results showed conclusively that Cade wasn't Alden's biological son. My father had known. The test was dated 15 years ago when Cade was 15. There was a note in my father's handwriting. Genevieve's secret. Kept for Ilara's sake. The boy isn't to blame for his mother's choices. I sat in the library for an hour, processing this. Genevieve had been cheating during her marriage. Cade was the result. And she'd been blackmailing Alden somehow to keep this hidden and maintain her lifestyle. Everything made horrible sense now. Why Cade was always the favorite, why Genevieve fought so hard to give him everything. She was protecting her guilty secret. I brought the DNA results to Benton the next morning. He read them carefully, then pulled out Alden's will. Your father structured everything very specifically. Do you see this clause? He pointed to legal language I'd never fully understood. This states that only blood relatives of Alden Vance can inherit from the primary estate. Your brother gets nothing because he isn't blood. Felt dizzy. But this means Dad knew all along. Benton nodded solemnly. He knew about the affair. He knew about Cade's paternity. But he stayed in the marriage to protect you. He was waiting for you to grow strong enough to stand up to your mother. Tears burned my eyes. He endured years of betrayal for me. Benton's voice softened. Your father loved you more than anything, Ilara. This entire structure, the trust, the right of first refusal, the hidden evidence, it was all designed to give you the tools to fight. He just needed you to find the courage. The legal proceedings moved quickly after the arson attempt. Genevieve was arrested and released on bail, but the damage was done. The shell company sale was voided due to fraud. However, the listing price she'd published, $1 million, was legally binding. Since she'd signed a contract with her own fake company at that price, the judge ruled she had to honor it. Benton explained it with barely contained glee. Because the shell company doesn't have the funds to complete the purchase, the property goes to the backup buyer. You, as per your right of first refusal. At the fraudulent listing price. I bought my childhood home for half its value. The same trick Genevieve tried to use to steal from the estate now worked against her. Oak Hall was mine for $1 million. Money I had from my father's separate trust. Justice was beautiful. 2 weeks later, Cade's penthouse was officially foreclosed. The bank seized everything. Furniture, clothes, electronics. He showed up at Oak Hall's gates on a cold Tuesday morning, carrying a single duffel bag. I watched him through the security camera as he pressed the intercom button. Ilara, it's me. I have nowhere else to go. My finger hovered over the button to open the gate. Part of me, the part that remembered building forts with him as children, wanted to let him in. But then I remembered the watch he'd stolen. The way he'd tried to sell testimony. His complete lack of remorse. I pressed the speaker button. The shelter on Maple Street has beds available. I called ahead for you. His voice cracked. You're really not going to help me. I thought about my father enduring years of betrayal. You made your choices, Cade. Now live with them. I turned off the monitor. The gate stayed closed. Genevieve was served with the lawsuit papers on a Friday afternoon. Grand larceny, fraud, forgery, and attempted arson. Benton and I met her at her lawyer's office for the deposition. She looked smaller somehow, her designer clothes hanging loose. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She read through the charges slowly, her hands shaking. When she finished, she looked up at me. How can you do this to your own mother? I leaned forward. You sold my childhood home without telling me, Mum. You stole from my savings for years. You forged documents and tried to burn down my father's legacy. My voice was steel. Now I'm buying your future. It looks like a very small jail cell. Her lawyer tried to negotiate. Benton shut him down immediately. Genevieve had no cards left to play. As we left, she called after me. Ilara, please. I didn't look back. Some bridges need to burn. The social consequences hit Genevieve harder than the legal ones. The Riverside Country Club revoked her membership. The charity boards removed her name from donor walls. Even the church auxiliary asked her to step down. I heard about it through Mrs. Patterson, who called to apologize again. She's been blacklisted from everything, Mrs. Patterson said quietly. And there's more. Those diamonds she always wore. The jeweler says they're cubic zirconia. She sold the real ones years ago and wore fakes. I wasn't surprised. Genevieve's entire life had been an elaborate costume. The grieving widow, the devoted mother, the pillar of society. All performance. Underneath was just a woman who'd betrayed everyone who trusted her. The morning diamonds were just another lie in a lifetime of deception. The community she'd worked so hard to impress had finally seen through the act. I began restoring Oak Hall to its former glory. The stranger's furniture was removed. My father's antique pieces came out of storage. I hired craftsmen to repair the water damage in the east wing and refinish the hardwood floors. One afternoon, while the contractors were removing damaged drywall in the study, they found something. "Miss Vance, you need to see this." Behind the walls were dozens of letters, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves, all addressed to me. All written by my father over the years I'd been away. I sat on the dusty floor and read them with tears streaming down my face. "My dearest Alara, you are in Ghana saving lives while your mother plots to steal your future. I wish I could tell you everything, but I know you need to discover your own strength." Each letter was a message of love, a warning, a gift. He'd hidden them for me to find when I needed them most. Genevieve tried one final manipulation. She had her lawyer call claiming she was dying of a mysterious heart condition and needed family support. Benton arranged for an independent medical examination. I sat in the doctor's office with Genevieve, who was still playing the role of fragile victim. The doctor reviewed her tests. "Mrs. Vance, I found no evidence of any heart condition whatsoever. Your EKG is normal. Your blood pressure is slightly elevated but nothing concerning." Genevieve's face flushed. "But my doctor said." The doctor cut her off. "The report you provided was falsified. The doctor listed doesn't exist in any medical database." I stood up. "Thank you, doctor." I looked at Genevieve. "You even fake being sick. Is there anything real about you?" She had no answer. Even her health had been a performance. I walked out, finally free from her manipulations. Despite everything, I couldn't let Genevieve end up homeless. My father wouldn't have wanted that, and I needed to be better than her. I bought a small one-bedroom cottage in a remote town 2 hours away. It was simple, clean, and affordable. I had it furnished with basics and paid the first year's rent. Then I had the deed delivered to Genevieve. Her lawyer called the next day. "My client doesn't want charity from you." Benton handled it. "Tell your client she has 2 choices, accept the cottage or face homelessness. Miss Vance is being far more generous than legally required." Genevieve moved in quietly without saying goodbye. I drove past once to make sure she'd arrived safely. I saw her through the window, alone in her small living room. "It's more than you gave me when you sold my bed while I was saving lives," I whispered. Then I drove back to Oak Hall and didn't look back. 6 months later, Oak Hall was transformed. The restoration was complete, better than it had ever been. But I wasn't living there alone. I stood in the grand foyer, watching children run through the halls laughing. The Alden Vance Foundation for Orphan Children was officially open. Oak Hall was no longer just a home, it was a sanctuary for kids who needed family. Benton had helped me structure everything legally. The foundation would operate indefinitely, funded by the profits from my father's investments. I walked upstairs to the study where my father's portrait hung. In the painting he was smiling, holding his antique watch, the one I'd recovered from Cade's girlfriend. "I found my strength, Dad," I said quietly. "Just like you knew I would." I was the keeper of the keys now, protecting not just a house but a legacy of love. Oak Hall would never be sold again. It belonged to every child who needed hope. Forever.